We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
And looking ahead to what is next.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?
Good afternoon. My name is Mathieu Paulet. I'm a tech reporter at Politico, and you are watching Politico Live, the on-stage extensions of our non-partisan journalism. Telecoms are having a moment again in the public debate, in the policy debate in Europe. Enrico, Letta, and Mario Draghi both agree the EU needs serious reforms to complete the single market and to stay relevant on the global stage. And this digital backbone, telecoms, must be part of that equation. For years, operators have been complaining about red tape and tough merger rules that would hold them back and make it difficult for them to invest, to upgrade on networks. Some numbers back this cry for help. We're still a bit far, for instance, from reaching our 2030 digital targets, connectivity targets. Real 5G deployment is lagging, and we're looking at a €200 billion bill to fill the gaps. As the EU looks for ways to boost innovation, competitiveness, the European Commission is working on a Digital Networks Act, a new law which will supposedly help modernize regulations and create the conditions for Europe's telecom sector to thrive. We have a fascinating panel coming up in a few minutes, but before we dive into it, I'd like to thank the GSMA for making this event possible today, and to thank all of you in the audience, whether you decided to join in person or online. At Politico, as you're probably aware, we like to make this conversation a bit interactive, so you can join the debate by tweeting at @LivePolitico, and you can also ask questions through Slido, using the hashtag #ScalingUpTelecoms. Questions with a name and organizations get priority. And we want to hear actually from you right away, so please take a moment to answer our poll, the question being, what should be the top priority for improving the Digital Networks Act? And we will look at the results at the end of our discussions. But first, let's hear it from Laszlo Toth, the head of Europe at the head for Europe at the GSMA. Laszlo, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mathieu. Ladies and gentlemen, dear members, colleagues, friends, on behalf of the GSMA, it's my pleasure to welcome so many of you to this GSMA Politico event focusing on scaling up European telecoms industry, organized to mark the 100 days since the new European Commission took office, and I thank you for joining us for this important occasion. I was looking back to the past 100 days, and indeed, a lot has happened in Europe and globally. We find ourselves in intense geopolitical dynamics, increased polarization and conflicts, and with that, an increased focus on security and competitiveness. And in that context, the role of the telecom industry in driving innovation and advancing AI, as well as other transformative technologies and securing Europe's sovereignty cannot be overstated. Europe relies on connectivity infrastructure, and it is something we simply cannot afford to neglect, especially with data traffic projected to triple in the next 5 years. Despite the critical role, telecom networks remain undervalued and under significant pressure, even as our industry works tirelessly to maintain and advance connectivity. According to the latest GSMA report, mobile operators contribute 85% of the investment in mobile internet infrastructure. But Europe is lagging behind other geographies in 5G connectivity and will likely not meet its own digital decade targets, as Matthew already mentioned. And the underlying challenge is a lack of private investment available for 5G infrastructure, a multi-billion euro funding gap driven by the poor investment climate for digital in Europe. We can only cope with the high investment needs if there is enough scale in the form of additional customers on the same network. Overly fragmented markets hinder efficient investment, and scaling up Europe's telecom sector must become a collective European priority. And there are two main policy elements to this. First, after 20 years of practice, review of the EU merger framework is timely. The Commission should adopt a more flexible, forward-looking and future-proof approach to merger controls, aiming to ensure competitive and economically attractive European markets with incentives to invest and innovate in the long run. Secondly, the Commission should aim to complete the digital single market so that the telecom sector can enjoy the benefits of a single market. Today, this is not the case. There are limited synergies in cross-border services. And the way to do it is to simplify and better harmonize rules at the EU level. Legislative, regulatory and procedural items that are obsolete, irrelevant or duplicative should be deleted, and the remaining items should be fully harmonized. Earlier this month, at GSMA's MWC Barcelona, we heard a commitment from the European Commission that 2025 will be the year of action. This is an encouraging sign, and it is also reflected in the EU Competitiveness Compass. The forthcoming Digital Networks Act, together with the revised approach to mergers, offer a unique opportunity to restore Europe's standing as global tech powerhouse. The message from the industry is clear. Europe's future hinges on the robust connectivity infrastructure. If we are to compete on a global stage, we must ensure that connectivity is at the heart of Europe's strategy. I'm pleased to see so many of you here, a broad range of stakeholders in the audience and also joining us online. Connectivity is a driving force behind so many of Europe's businesses and industries, and we all recognize that we cannot afford to get it wrong. I'd like to thank POLITICO for the cooperation and for partnering with us for this event on such an important topic. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to an insightful discussion on the Digital Networks Act, Telecom Single Market, scale, competitiveness, today and throughout the year of action. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Laszlo, we're going to break down some of these issues in a minute, but I'm not going to do that on myself. I actually need the panelists of the day to join me on stage. Please, if you care to come on stage with me. Thank you very much. I'm going to do a quick introduction. So on my left, Renate and Nikolai, you're the Deputy Director General at DG Connect. Next to Robert Murek, so you're the Chair of BEREC, which is the body bringing European telecom regulators together. You're more than that, but you're the Chair of BEREC this year. Then Jacob Greiner, the Dutch Telecom's Vice President for European Affairs. And rounding out our panels at the far end, Alexander Soltysiak, Councillor for Telecoms, Radio Spectrum and AI at the Polish Permanent Representation, which is currently assuming the chairmanship of the council. Thanks so much for being here and joining this conversation. Renate, I'll start with you. So we had the chance to discuss already the future reforms in similar settings in the past, but the Digital Networks Act is expected for the end of the year, which is in Brussels time, practically tomorrow. So I was going to ask you, so how is the drafting coming along?
I would say we're not yet fully at the stage of drafting. We are at the stage of conceptualizing. We are at the stage of updating our evidence to have the best, assessment of the impact. We are at a stage of digging in deep dive brainstorming sessions at the technical and political level into choices to be made. We are at a stage of engaging and dedicated kind of meetings with stakeholders so that we get it as right as possible, but also as bold as possible.
Okay, so it's a good time to give you input. So now this panel today is a good time.
Yes.
Okay, so this is your time to actually make pleas to the Commission. Jakob, so the DNA, so this is happening. What do you think? At long last, finally some reform of the telecom rule book?
Yes, but the question is how that reform will look like in the end, because it's not the first reform that we've had. And so I think all the signals that we hear, the white paper that has been building up the discussion, the reports that we have seen by Mr. Letta and Draghi, I think that all speaks a promising language, but I also have been too long in Brussels to believe everything that is being debated for 3 years. So we really look forward to a very, very bold reform, but I would say it's safe to say, I hope you don't correct me, that the reform will come. And so that's already a good thing.
Robert, do we need another act? Is there a compelling case for having an act on telecoms?
I think, as Jakob just said, we have regularly reviewed the current framework, and the current framework has 2025 as a review date in it. So I think it's timely and it's good. One thing that I would say is that if you look at the kind of problems that are signaled by the industry and signaled by Mr. Draghi, I think a review of the telecom framework won't cut it. I actually think that what the telecom framework has done is it has, over the last 20 years, deregulated most of the markets. We have very few levers left as regulators, and there's still a lot to do, and I can definitely say that a review can do good things. But I think if you want the kind of step change that industry wants, or that Draghi wants, you also need to take into account adjacent pieces of legislation like competition law, merger law, and many more things, because otherwise we won't get the effects we want.
Mm-hmm. So some of the ideas have been already laid out in the white paper by the European Commission, right? Alexander, and I want to turn to you. Is it fair to say that you're probably the least excited of the lot about the potential future plan?
Well, again,
as you, not in Alexander, or you tell me, but you as in the council, right? National governments, of course.
As the council, yeah, we are pretty much in the hands of commission. So again, we are still waiting for the analysis taken by the commission and doing by the contractor on this. So we are eagerly waiting for them to see their scope, because as the council, we've already been vocal within our previous two council conclusions from previous presidencies. So Belgian presidency prepared the council conclusions to the white paper, and again, Hungarian presidency we adopted this in December last year, again to the white paper. So we have reports from Letta, from Draghi. We have two council conclusions. We also have Barek's as well opinion on the white paper. We have RSPG opinion. So we have a lot to digest. And again, this is the time when we are waiting for the outcome of the analysis taken by the Commission on this.
Okay, so let me try and actually get something out of the commission then, so we can discuss this. So my understanding is that the Digital Networks Act will be about finding ways to unlock more investment, more money to go in the networks, to go in the rollout. How do we get there? How do we get there through a regulation?
I think we need a new deal for connectivity, because this is not just another review of the telco code. We are in a slightly different context. In terms of the technological advancements, we are in a different context when it comes to resilience and security considerations. We are in a different context when it comes to our tech sovereignty. We are in a different context when it comes to the geopolitics. It is true that, one act will not change it entirely, but it is also true that when you look at the key kind of challenges for the future for the EU to really make a leap ahead on tech competitiveness, then you see that connectivity is the underpinning foundation for it. An AI continent needs to be fueled by connectivity, modern, resilient connectivity. That's where the kind of the context comes in. And that's also where, the momentum comes. So how can that be different? By taking a critical look at a concept that was created in a totally different situation, almost 30 years ago, in a context where you had monopolies and you wanted to open them. Today is a different situation. Today, when you look at the necessary regulatory framework, where we can simplify, where we can, maybe, get rid of some of the approaches, where we can modernize, where we can harmonize better, we have a chance to take a holistic look at connectivity. The players in this, the kind of different aspects of connectivity, not only terrestrial, look at the cables, look at the satellites, to really take a kind of strategic, coherent, holistic look at this and deal with this in this context. Also be critical about what we have seen in the application of the current framework. I think the evaluation that we are going to do next to the new act will be quite telling. Member states took very, very long to transpose the last directive. And on top of that, you know, added things, the famous gold plating. So we really have to take a critical look at that. And I think from that, one can kind of also make conclusions to have a better, a more relevant, a more up-to-date and a more holistic approach to connectivity.
But if member states took that long, does it also mean that maybe you need more time to actually assess the effects of the implementation?
No, I mean, we've been kind of working with member states on that for the last years. I mean, that's, as you know, the normal work of the EU as guardian of the treaty. When there is a transposition exercise ongoing, we have to be in touch with the member states. We have to kind of follow so that they are doing the necessary things. So I think we have by now quite a good overview.
Jakob, so these days we talk a lot about simplification, deregulation, and I'm curious about what it would actually mean for the telecom industry. So if we are playing a little game that I've just made up, regulatory surgeon, what's the first cut? What are the non-essential parts of our rule book that we can get rid of?
First, we need to get the dying patient back to life in general.
Dying patient, okay.
So I think a little tweak here at the liver or the kidney is not enough. Let me build on what Renate said. I think the biggest mistake, without going yet into articles, the biggest mistake of the previous reforms was that it is indeed a directive. And that has led to member states, I'm sorry to say, laggards on the implementation side. That has indeed led to gold plating. I can give you many examples on this. To make one example from sectorial rules, consumer provisions. There are consumer provisions in the code. You could already ask yourself, why is there a consumer protection regime just for the telecom sector, while there is a horizontal regime already existing at European level? So I think there needs to be a sanity check between both. We today in Germany, we have something, it's called, I need to look it up, I think it's, yes, Produktinformationsblatt, product information. At the same time, we have a contractual summary. You summarize the main contractual elements, but you also have the Produktinformationsblatt. I can tell you, 1 year when we assessed this, 0.03% of people clicked actually at the PDF that we provide to them on the homepage when they look at the tariffs and the products. That's not what I would say is simple. And so I hope the homework of the Commission that is doing now is really to cut down on all the rules that just do not make sense because they either exist or because they're horizontally or because they have just run out of time. Another example, and then I stop. You remember e-privacy. I remember it when I started in Deutsche Telekom 10 years ago. We started with the GDPR, horizontal law, applies to everybody. Wait a minute, there's the e-privacy directive, applies to the telcos. Means that if you process, and I repeat the story that I repeated 8 years ago, if you process data, GPS location data under the GDPR, you can do that with not so much restrictions. You can further process it. If you do the same with mobile location data, which is less precise, you cannot do that unless you have the consent of the users. So this needs to go, and whatever is left, and I think the only thing that is left is the confidentiality of communications, which is important, that can end up, if you want, in a DNA, in a GDPR, but this sanity check we need across the rule book.
E-privacy is out of the way, sort of, so that's a good signal.
Only the regulation, not the directive.
Yeah, of course, Alexander, have member states been too laggard? And also, like, do you hear this argument of regulation versus directive?
Over-regulation, yes, that's why we are advocating for a simplification as the Polish presidency, but we also wanted to take a different approach that it was already taken in the previous council conclusions. That's why we wanted to follow up on the our motto, Security Europe. So we wanted to focus on a completely different angle in this council conclusions that we are right now negotiating in the working party in the council. So now we have the second version of our council conclusions on reliable and resilient connectivity, because, as Renata already mentioned, we are living in a completely different world right now. So geopolitics matter, and the main reason standing behind our council conclusions on reliable and resilient connectivity is the Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, but also natural disasters that are happening probably on a daily basis. We've witnessed the floods across Poland. Spain witnessed floods in Valencia, and recently we had floods in Italy. So both factors are very important and essential for strengthening the communications and our infrastructure. So this is the angle we are right now taking in the council conclusions, and hopefully we'll be able to finalize them.
That's a fair point, and I was going to ask you. So, do you think so? Are the growing tensions with the US, is the hybrid threat context also giving a different flavor to the conversation we're having about telecoms, about scaling up telecoms?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's only about the scaling up. I think it's more. Let's take an example. Let's talk about satellites for a moment. Quite a strategic kind of aspect of connectivity. So what makes...
Wasn't so much in the spotlight until some years ago, right?
Exactly. But will come a lot in the spotlight. We were just talking about, WRC in 27, kind of very, very clear that will have, so the World Radio Conference in 27 will have a huge, focus on satellites. So to look at satellites has to be looked at from a competitiveness point of view, but also from a security point of view. And here, that's a debate to be had. How do we position ourselves in terms of a single market? Satellites are inevitable, cross-border. So how do we position ourselves when it comes to, creating the best kind of regime for, spectrum, for instance, on that? So I think that's an element that would probably have been looked at in a different way a couple of years ago. The scaling is a rather old debate. I would not, link that to the geopolitical context, but I think the resilience of all the kind of, areas of connectivity, even the terrestrial, even if we are not talking about that so much because we're talking more about cable and satellites, I think is an aspect that we have to reflect in the new regulatory approach.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back to deregulation with you, Robert, actually, and here's some irony, people would say, and that echoes some questions I see on Slido about the level playing field. Like there is this idea of maybe we need to extend some of the current rules to adjacent industries. So we're talking cloud providers. The question in the chat is about this. I never know what the acronym stands for, but the NIICS, maybe you know better, but messaging services, right? Non-interpersonal.
Number independent.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. There you have it. Okay. I shouldn't have. Be bold. Nix. Okay. Right. I should have stuck to Nix. So I know that's something you've looked into at BEREC, not under your chairmanship, I believe, but on the previous chairmanships. So yeah, again. So do you think that's a good idea? That's worth exploring?
Well, I think that the white paper made a valiant effort of describing the current value chain in the communications industry. So rather than the telcos being at the center of a value chain and being the big dominant player in that value chain, which was the case 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we now see that that value chain has got new players, the hyperscalers, the over-the-top NICs, service providers, of course the telcos, but also suppliers of equipment, and that is a far more complex environment. Whether or not we should bundle that into a single framework, that's up to the Commission, but there are a lot of different problems there as well. The problem of what a cloud provider could pose to competition and to a good market outcome is different from what a telco can do or what a service provider like a NICS can do. So they all contribute. They all provide different competition risks or not, and we have to find a kind of a balance of how we do that. My view is always, you know, try to reduce regulation as far as you can, and so not more regulation for everyone, but less regulation for everyone would be the desired outcome, but only if you don't leave hostages to fortune in terms of competition issues that are not properly regulated or looked after, or etc. So I do see that the framework can bring all those things together. How you exactly do that is
okay. Renato, are we looking at more regulation for certain players?
I think it's very important to pick up on what Robert said on the cloud. I think, you know, we have an issue on cloud infrastructure in Europe, and I think that will be tackled with, you know, the Cloud and AI Infrastructure Act or Development Act. And I think that's more of an industrial policy approach, because it's very clear that with the current, again, the geopolitical situation, also there, dependency structures need to be addressed. And I think we need to kind of, you know, create an environment where you know, cloud solutions can be developed in Europe and can be sustained in Europe. So there will be a debate about sovereign cloud, and that will have to be addressed in that act. And also, when you think about you know, the AI continent philosophy that we are pursuing now, you of course need kind of, you know, cloud infrastructure. You really need data centers, and ideally they should be energy efficient. And here we can maybe also build on our, you know, good, you know, developments that we did in the context of the green transition on energy efficiency gains. So I think it is more the idea of following a CHIPS Act approach to really have a proactive industrial policy approach on, you know, developing a cloud infrastructure that will be
more
so
data
necessary.
Centers, more cloud computing.
Absolutely.
Capacity.
Absolutely. I think it's more that and not necessarily that now we need kind of, you know, cloud to be regulated in the DNA. I think what is needed on the cloud infrastructure is really to give a push to innovation and industrial development.
And don't forget, cloud is already taken care of to some extent in the DMA, for example, or the Data Act as well.
Exactly.
So that holistic approach that we talked about is important here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Completing each other's arguments. Look at that.
We promised to do that this time. You know.
That's the situation between the Commission and BEREC.
I'm sure. Alexander, I guess the overarching goals for all EU regulation in general is to get closer to a single market, right? So I was going to ask you how far off we are from a single market for telecoms, and whether it's relevant to talk about a single market for telecoms?
Yes, it is relevant. That's why we are also thinking of this topic in our council conclusions, but this is not the main point of them and our discussions today in the council, because as I already mentioned, our motto is Security Europe, and we wanted to focus more on that, because again, as I said, we had discussion within the council on this approach, I mean on the single market in the previous council conclusions. That's why we want to emphasize more on that, on resilience and reliability of the networks. And as Renate rightly said, we are also focusing on the satellites, because we think that the buzzword for today is direct-to-device, and of course 6G, and we are also focusing on that topics, on that technologies that are like under development right now, but will be soon very important for Europe. And again, WRC is coming. We are in the halfway. We are going to have, I mean, as the RSPG Radio Spectrum Policy Group, we are going to adopt the interim opinion which will describe also the agenda items that are very important for Europe, for the European Union as well. And since like 80% of agenda items for WRC are meant for the satellites, we think that it's also very important to take this on board. That's why we are thinking of this in our council conclusions, and the discussions are going to be taken also probably in the coming months.
Jakob, I want to speak more specifically about scale, right? So, and because I think that's one of the things on top of your list and ways to get scale. So mergers are one route, right? But it's probably going to be addressed in probably outside of the DNA. But so my question is, so how can we get scale through the DNA, through this regulation? Are there any other ways than just mergers?
Maybe to come back to your patient before, I was just thinking of the single market, not to circumvent your question, but the regulatory piece is the heart. That's really how I see it. Our investors see this as a major problem, and I think that's where the DNA needs to focus the most. You could say the blood is spectrum. We haven't talked about spectrum yet.
Gonna get there, and I love the idea. I love that you love my metaphor.
We have been bold in the past, tried to do a lot of infusions in the blood. Well, somehow it stayed cold. The third one is muscles, strength, and that's competition, because we need scale. And it is our clear conviction that we need scale mainly due to a reform of competition policy. But yes, I will not torture Renate with this at this panel, obviously. And the last one is the single market, and that can be part of our vision moving forward. Although we see quite well at the moment, but yes, of course, in a long-term perspective, I think it is good that the Commission is also thinking about this, because yes, of course, the single market is one of the great achievements, not everywhere achieved yet, of the European Union, and we need to work on that also on telecoms. But yeah, so to answer your question, scale, I think, I'm afraid we need to also have a panel with somebody from DG Competition here, because it is important and it is on our wish list, and I wasn't doing my job if I wouldn't say that we are not completing a reform if we are not talking about this outside of the DNA.
But then it brings the $1 billion question. Does more scale translate necessarily into more investment, more innovation? I'm looking at you, Robert. What do you think?
I think in-country consolidation will bring its benefits. I think the DNA should focus more on taking away problems that make it difficult to create scale in Europe. But I would be very uncomfortable with trying to create European champions or trying to doctor the market so that we get 3 or 4 big operators or something.
You just said it would bring benefits still, right? In market consolidation.
In certain markets,
yes,
it can. Yeah, no, definitely, it can. And we can play a role as regulators, I think, in that sense that what we have seen, for example, happen in the UK recently, where the merger between Three and Vodafone was based on more behavioral remedies. And the only way you can actually monitor those behavioral remedies is if you have an ex-ante regulator that is able to look at that. So I think there is definitely a link with the DNA where we can say we as regulators can play a role in doing that if the competition colleagues think that that would be a way forward. So I definitely see some way to do that. But it's very difficult to create the kind of scale in Europe in an artificial way. I tried to develop pan-European networks in the past. If you really want to get the benefits out of a pan-European network, you don't only want to do the technology, but far more important is all those functions like marketing and those that really are big parts of a telecom company. And that is very difficult because we have different languages, different offers. So you don't have a fully harmonized market that you see in India or in China or in the US. So we will have to compromise to some extent, but we should take away all the barriers for a company that has found a solution that they can do that. And again, this is sorry to go on. This is an area, I think, where holistic regulation comes into play too, because my experience was that some of the legislation around safety and security that national governments implement for their own territory is often the big problem in order to build a pan-European network.
Mm-hmm. Renato, I see you nodding at a lot of.
Yeah, because I think it's I agree with pretty much everything Robert said, and I think there is a debate to be had also about, is there a way maybe to look at a more common approach on some of the security requirements. It's not an easy debate. It's something that we are discussing still. But, you know, there are also, in the context of this new commission, some plans to come back to daring proposals, for instance, on data retention, you know, a common kind of approach to that, a European approach to that. Something like that could, of course, feed in.
Shouldn't be in the DNA?
No, has nothing to do. But if it were to kind of develop, you would have a kind of a more common, you know, approach to that, instead of having at the moment a spaghetti bowl of kind of, you know, national rules, which make kind of, you know, cross a pan-European approach, a single market approach, also as a business strategy for operators a bit more burdensome. So I think there's development on that as well, and there are, you know, maybe discussions to be had how we can simplify here in that regard as well. But I would agree that when kind of talking about a modernization of the regime, it's really a lot about, you know, what we had as kind of, you know, criteria on authorizations, on, you know, general regulatory context that we should take a critical look at. And that would kind of create a different impression on that sector, and would in itself, I believe, make it more attractive for investors.
Okay, so back to the investment point we discussed earlier. Alexander, what do you make of this idea of having big champions in Europe in the telecom sector?
Big champion.
Yes. Pan-European champion.
We are not very much in favor of this kind of idea, especially when it comes to the spectrum management. And I will just refer to the RSPG opinion on that the spectrum management is a national competence, actually. So
this is just about spectrum?
Not only, but we think, and this is at least our Polish approach, not the presidency, that the possible consolidation might be negative in terms of competition. So this is our approach, and we do think that the current regulations, when it comes to the radio spectrum, for instance, and the code, we have the provisions that allow, for instance, for a joint authorizations. But for now, until now, I mean, we have Article 37, but for the moment, we didn't use it, actually. So perhaps we need to find another way to find a possible solution for that, how we can improve. Because on the other hand, we need the regulation, that is very important, but of course, better harmonization.
Okay, Jakob, I sense that you want to jump in on that question.
Yes, because when you talk about European champions, we are so far away from European champions in Europe that I think it's a philosophical question, first of all. We're talking about, and you know all the numbers, I'm not going to, well, I repeat them anyways, 45 something, depending on which report you are reading, mobile operators, more than 100 in fixed. We are far away from, I don't know, the famous 10 or 5 or whatever you want to see in the future. For us, it is at the moment important to reach scale within our country where we have oftentimes mainly 4 mobile operators competing with each other. And I'm not even talking about the virtual ones that come on top of it. And, you know, this debate is always being very quickly ending up in some form of a price discussion. why do we have this discussion here since 3 years now? It's not about prices. Have we raised prices in the last 10 years? Has the sector been able to do that? Is it socially accepted in Europe to do that? The answer is no. I don't think we are going to move there. We are maybe able to adapt to inflation, but that's it. So we need to find other avenues. And maybe just one short point on competition policy. Draghi said you need to focus more on efficiencies and on investments. What does it mean? It means that if I have more customers on my network because of a merger, I create more efficiencies, more revenues just because of that, not because I raise prices. It's because I have more on my machine and the machine is working full steam. And that leads to more return on investment. And that's what this DNA is, I think, all about. It's about trying to get return on investment back. That is at the moment not the case. And there are many different ways to do that. It's deregulation, it's a spectrum policy that is ambitious, it is competition policy in our view, and that's the way we need to move ahead, not about price increases.
But you also know very well that there are these concerns that fewer players would translate into less competition, which will in turn translate into higher prices.
Well, I don't know, you need to give me the proof on this, because I have read so many studies on this, and every time there's a study coming out here, then there's another study coming out there, and none of those studies actually say one clear-cut thing. And so until that's the case, I think it's a solution.
There is a question from Slido actually on this. Are telecoms customers willing to pay higher prices for more investment, better quality?
I don't think so, and that's actually very sad, to be honest, but that's a reality. You know, when I talk about the fact that we make double the price in the US with our company T-Mobile, then it is a reality that is very good for me. And then everybody else here will say, oh my God, I'm not going to be willing to pay even more. I'm already paying so much in Belgium or in Germany and I don't know what. I mean, we have seen and discussed this several times in the last couple of months. The amount of money you pay today for a mobile subscription is a joke. You can have a pack of cigarettes, or I think Orange talked about a burger, or you can talk about, you know, associations talk about beer and paninis, and
you all came up with different.
You know, there are many examples that you can choose, but I would say we are so affordable, in my view, that we have this malaise of the sector, that there are 2/3 of operators who invest more than they actually get back. So I think for me, it's not a discussion about price raising. Unfortunately, the funniest thing is, I think one of our associations made a study around how consumers perceive price developments. And consumers perceive that prices go up, but they are not. And that, I think, tells you all. So I think it's kind of, we are considered as a public commodity, which is a nice thing. I would also like to have a cheap mobile contract, but at the same time, it's part of the problem. And we need to have it fixed through other ways. And the other ways, hopefully, will come in the DNA.
Renata, what do you make of the problem, the malaise that Jakob is talking about around prices? And
I think we cannot have a DNA that doesn't kind of reconfirm that competition and consumer interests are at the heart of what we're doing. So, you know, there's no way that we would kind of do away with those objectives. We might add other objectives, such as sustainability or resilience, but there's no question mark about competition and consumer being at the heart of it. This has been a success story of telecom liberalization, and this should be what we should also be proud of. On the other hand, we're going to talk about slightly different services in the future. We're talking about, you know, technological advancement that will inevitably, you know, lead to new business models. Some of it might be B2B, but, you know, a lot will probably also kind of affect consumers. So I think this is an issue that we need to bear in mind, and hence, you know, have as modern and as light and relevant a regulatory regime for the kind of, you know, actors in the connectivity market to flourish, to cooperate with each other, to make good business, to develop kind of new business models in the context of AI applications. You can think of many things, and there's a lot happening already, just talking about network as a service, net slicing, and all the things that we know. But, you know, the consumer must remain at the heart of what we are doing.
Mm-hmm. Robert, I wanted to actually ask you also about this. Do you think prices are too low in Europe for the service we have?
every country is different, and I can point at historic reasons why prices became so low in Europe and why they're difficult to raise. But I think there are also positive things on the horizon. I think the fiber networks will be a lot more efficient, and it will allow for transport of more data for less money. So I do think that operators will see an increase in their profitability. The same goes for 5G. If I look at my own country, without pointing, I see an operator still making almost 50% of an EBITDA in the market, and most of that money goes towards investment in fiber. In 2 years' time, when the fiber network has been rolled out, that company will have a superior asset that delivers data a lot cheaper, and they don't have to invest that money, and that money that just goes to the bottom line. And so this is one example, but I assume that other companies in Europe have done similar things. So at the moment, we are in a very negative mood and in a very downtrodden situation. I also see some hope in the sector, and I do see how we can crawl out of this to some extent. So
that's good and refreshing to hear. The time is running by fast. I wanted to also talk about spectrum. You've all hinted at it, and I think that's going to be a pillar, maybe not a pillar, you tell me, of the digital networks act, but there will be something about spectrum. I remember, again, Roberto Viola in a similar panel some months ago telling me he was very hoping this time for an actual reform. So we know this spooks EU capitals. We're gonna ask you in a minute, but so what's really on the table in the DNA on spectrum? Are we talking tweaks? Are we talking revolution?
There is no DNA yet, as I said.
Yes. But you must know where you're going, no? Please.
Oh, of course. Of course we know where we're going. But I think we have to deal with the competences reality, which is a mixed. We have to, look at what makes sense from a strategic point of view. I talked about satellites. And we have to build on the experience of what is in the code at the moment on spectrum, for instance, the peer review. So, so there are things that can be improved significantly. And I think a little bit more of a coordinated approach here could also give a very important signal to the market. The 5G rollout has been late also because of very different approaches on 5G licensing and spectrum management. And that we must not repeat. Because that has been a factor for our competitiveness, and it has been a factor for where we are on 5G business cases. So I think there is a case for looking at spectrum in a more strategic way, bearing in mind that this cannot be commission only, not at all, and this is also not at all what we are after. But to have a more strategic, more coordinated, more predictable approach on, duration, authorization procedures, strategic choices to be made. I think that would be a very, very strong signal for, the future for Europe.
Alexander, do you feel reassured by what you hear? Renate really said enunciate a mixed competency. What do you make of that?
Yes, we've already addressed this issue, and again in the previous council conclusions, and the RSPG as well in the opinion to the white paper already mentioned this. Well, we are we are living in a different dimension right now than we had that we've been living since 2022. So. And that's why we are taking on board the different focus in the council conclusions. I mean, the convergence of the infrastructure, and this is very important for us, and that's why it is also important in the eve of the spectrum management. So we think that well. This is a good direction. We need more coordination. That's for sure. I don't fully agree that the peer review is the mechanism that is bad. I think we can improve this as well, because we started with the voluntary basis. Right now we have this embedded in the code, but definitely. Since we are talking about and we are going to have completely different technologies around the corner, I mean the D2D, 6G, then we need to think about how we can, I mean, as the European Union, improve this.
Robert, is there room for more cooperation on spectrum as well? I saw you like doing like some faces when Renate spoke about spectrum. You didn't seem to agree. I'm sorry, I'm telling on you, but you didn't seem to fully agree on everything she said.
Well, I think first of all, Barrick leaves all the spectrum issues to the RSPG, so we don't have a common view. I don't think that on spectrum the issues are. There's definitely improvements that we can make. There are definitely ideas that we can put forward but at the same time, I don't think that the situation is completely broken or bad. Or, for example, and that's why I was gesticulating, we in Ireland, we were the first ones to make 5G spectrum available, and we had to threaten operators with compliance action because they weren't using it. So making spectrum available early on doesn't necessarily mean that that it will be used. In this case, the operators made very rational decisions where to invest and how to invest it, and they didn't see the business case and therefore didn't invest as early as the spectrum was available. So it's not always that easy as an analysis.
Mm-hmm. Jakob, do you want to jump in on spectrum? What exactly does the industry want on spectrum?
Very quickly, one sentence. Longer licenses and longer prolongation. That is something that has been done in Spain. 20 years plus 20 years. 2 days ago in Germany was decided to extend the licenses that we have for another 5 years. That's good. It's a good step in the right direction. In my opinion, it's not enough. Why? It's very simple. It takes out a lot of money. We have spent 66 billion euros, German operators alone, in the last 24 years just on spectrum. And that's money that is not in our pocket that we can spend into deployment. And so that's, in a nutshell, one sentence, longer licenses, longer prolongation.
Okay, sounds like an easy fix.
Sure.
No? What do you think? Is it in the pipeline?
I said duration is something that we should look into. Yes.
Okay, fair enough. We need to wrap up, but I'd like to end with a very practical question to the Commission, Renate. So, because you talked about like the revision of the code earlier, right? So, will the Digital Networks Act replace, supplement, merge with the code? I think we've heard conflicting signals about how those two pieces will.
Now let me kind of clarify that. We will kind of evaluate the code and we will replace it with the Digital Networks Act. And we might even consider simplifying other acts into it. So really a bigger kind of, simplification exercise. So really, the new rule of the game of this new commission is simplification. So when we touch something, it's not about, more acts. It's about merging them into less acts. And that's very much the philosophy that we want to pursue as well.
So Digital Networks Act is expected on Q4.
Yep.
So is the revision of the code.
Yep.
What's going to come first? How does it work? Will you have like an actual documents evaluating the code?
Yes. Okay. Comes at the same time.
At the same time?
Yes.
On the same day?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know when exactly already?
fourth quarter.
Fair enough. Okay. Thank you
That's the last Friday before Christmas. That's,
With a deadline
we'll
of
see
2
about
weeks.
that. Yeah. Let's archive that and look into that. Yeah, thank you so much. That's all the time we have today. But I'd like to thank you, to thank the panelists, thank the audience for making it here on a sunny day in Brussels. We can have a quick look at the results of the poll. Actually, as you remember, the question was, what should be the top priority for improving the Digital Networks Act? If we can have a look, right, just behind us. So completing a single market for connectivity, coming on top. Thank you for joining us, so on site and also online. You're more than welcome to take the conversation upstairs, actually, with a cozy networking session with drinks and canapé, I'm told. And thanks a lot to our partner GSMA for making this event possible. We'd love to hear your feedback, so feel free to email us about the event at live@politico.eu. And finally, you can check out the Politico Live's website for the latest events lineup and be the first to hear from experts on what's shaking the EU. Thank you very much, and until next time.
We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
And looking ahead to what is next.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?